thank you everyone for participating. All of these people have had their designated speeches, and hey, Michael Fuller, can you let Erica in as a host so that she can join this conversation?
Sure thing, we'll do.
Yeah, she just rose her hand. And so, yeah, so we'll get into, this is a Bitcoin and gold panel, not necessarily an argument, but if people want to argue, they can. We have people from the Bitcoin side, we have people from the gold side, and so we'll try to keep it civil. And
I like to argue.
Yeah,
it's no fun if we're not arguing.
Exactly, debate. That's what it's all about.
And I see David's here now too. Hey, David. Okay, so I think we actually have everyone now.
All right.
And okay, so I mean, we can just start with basics. I mean, what are the major risks that you see to either gold or Bitcoin going forward? And I think that maybe we can start with Rich, and he could say the risks that. I mean, he's a gold guy, so I mean, talk about gold and Bitcoin, then we can let everyone chime in and hear the defense.
All right. Well, as far as hi everybody, good to be back again, and thanks everybody for joining us. You know, in terms of the risks for gold, you know, everything in this world has some sort of risk. You can slip falling in your bathtub, so gold does have some risks. A lot of times, folks will tout that confiscation is one of them. I just want to kill that right at the start. In August 15th, we're gonna celebrate the golden jubilee of Richard Nixon temporarily closing the gold window. And at that point, there's no risk of confiscation any longer, because the only reason they did it back in 33 was to devalue the dollar. So that's off the table, unless we get back on the gold standard. It doesn't look like that's going to happen anytime soon. I think the biggest risks to gold are, you know, theft or potentially counterfeits, although that exists, but it's very much under control. It's a minuscule amount of the business. I think there's two major risks to Bitcoin. The first being Elon Musk, and the second one being the governments around the world. And I don't see them going away anytime soon. I think they like the idea of a digital currency. They're trying to learn everything they can from Bitcoin that's possible. Of course, they're not going to come out with a decentralized currency. They're going to come out with a CBDC, which should have everybody shaking in their shoes right now, because it means absolute control of the government and complete loss of privacy to every individual using it. But I think that's their motive in the end. Bitcoin, as long as it's not a threat to their power, which comes from the control of the currency, is going to be fine to do whatever the hell it wants to do in the background. But it's not going to be a real threat if they don't want it to be. And I'm sure Erica's going to say they can't stop it, but I'm pretty sure they can.
Stop it.
All right. Who's next?
Anyone want
I'll
to chime
jump
in on
in.
that?
I'll take it.
Go ahead, Paul.
My turn?
Yeah, go for it, Paul.
Oh, all right. You know, gold, let's start with gold. Gold has some threats. I'm not really worried about gold per se. I won't bother getting into that right now. Gold is, you know, you got physical gold, you got physical gold. If it's in a place that's trustworthy, that holds it for you, you got it. So that's nice. But on Bitcoin, you know, it's a funny thing. The real risk to Bitcoin on a daily basis is just simply fear. People are afraid. It's real easy to scare people about something new, and God help you if it's new and different. You know, there's been a lot of attack over the last 2 weeks. I mean, we had the government of China 3 times, the Federal Reserve, the US Treasury, the Bank of England, the Pope, Google, I think the ECB, and a few others, Elon Musk, don't forget him,
Yes.
all trying to scare people away from Bitcoin. But the thing is, it's just fear. There is no actual point to the sword. It's just a scary image. And what happens is that people get into Bitcoin not really knowing what they're getting into. This is a new thing. It's not a bond. It's not a stock. It's not a company. And it's when we still try to use terms to try from the old way to try to describe it, and it confuses people, and they get in because the number is going up, and then somebody, the big talking heads on CNBC or whomever else, the Wall Street Journal or whatever, start saying bad things about it, and then they get scared, and then they pull out, and a zillion people pulling out at the same time in a not terribly huge market makes a difference. So this thing goes on all the time. That's the big threat against Bitcoin on if you're worried about the price. In terms of technology, it's there. We've been popping out blocks since 2009. A block gets popped out every 10 minutes and it just keeps on going. I'm really not worried about that at all. And government's taking it over. I think they've already given up. First of all, these guys are not omnipotent. They can make a big bang. They can blow stuff up. They can send agents to shoot you, but they're not omnipotent. And I think we err when we imagine that they are. They could have done something a month or two ago when there was a big lawsuit against Tether, which is a big stable coin, and they settled it in proper too big to fail fashion. Slap on the wrist and you will give us papers every quarter to show that you're being good boys and girls. And that's it. What that meant to me, and what I'm quite sure it means, is that hurting Tether and thus hurting Bitcoin would have caused more trouble for them than it was worth. And I just don't see that happening. Is anything possible? Sure. And anything's possible. But I don't see that really being an issue. You guys can take it from there.
Yeah, I'll start some stuff too. That definitely, government stopping it, specifically Bitcoin. Bitcoin has already been declared not as a commodity. They've already given some guidance on how to tax it with the IRS. The fact that all of these government entities are part of the system now, Bitcoin itself, we can't say anything about any of the other cryptocurrencies, is pretty much safe. And then, I mean, if you look at other countries, like, for example, like Venezuela, you look at China, you look at Turkey, and even India, they try to ban Bitcoin so many times, but they can't. I think it's, can't remember that Middle Eastern country, but they also tried to, Iran, but it's not Iran, actually. It's
Qatar, Bangladesh. I got a list. Algeria.
Their bank also tried to ban Bitcoin, but there's just so much liquidity there because there's a lot of tech. They have a lot of tech workers that just get paid from overseas. So for individual countries have tried to ban Bitcoin, but I always bring it back to the idea where when movies came out, right? There was a video there was a little clip in the beginning that said FBI warning, fines up to $250,000 if you illegally download and distribute this video, but people still did because you can't stop the power of the internet. And so that's kind of one of the great features of Bitcoin. But if we're talking about risks, I mean, one of the risks of gold is that it is physical, right? So you can lose it, just like you can lose your private keys. But the issue with it being physical is that we have to believe that there is a controlled inflation schedule of gold. We have to believe that it is a 2% per year is whatever they're projecting, whatever they tell us, we have to believe. And there's really no one way for an individual to go online and verify that. But with Bitcoin, they've solved that problem because we don't have to trust anymore. We can verify for ourselves that these things are occurring. So someone asked, why is Bitcoin not backed by gold? There are other cryptocurrencies that are backed by gold, but you don't need Bitcoin to be backed by gold, because what it's backed by are these miners, these computers that are running the network, and the ledger that is perfect in all of the math involved with it.
Yes.
Rich is looking at me.
I got some comments here. I first would like to ask Erica, please show the viewers your nails.
Oh, yeah.
Which team are you on, Erica? That looks gold to me.
No, it's A for anarchy, which anarcho-capitalism,
okay.
guys.
I could have sworn that was gold, Erica, but but I'd also like to point out the tulips are not backed by gold either, but we don't talk about those today. Look, I think, I agree with everything people have said up to this point, so I'm not going to reiterate too much. I think some of the risks, I agree with Rich that confiscation is not really an issue anymore, primarily because there's no reason to. Just like there's no reason for the government to confiscate Bitcoin. You know, if it's tied to something that's a risk. You know, you can look back at I mean, a good example of actually Gresham's law I want to bring up real quick, because that's basically saying that the bad chases out the good. So any sort of government cryptocurrency most likely is going to push people into ones that they feel more comfortable with. So I think it's just like what happened with gold, right? And people aren't going to even if they did confiscate it, people would not willingly give up their gold, right? That's just not going to happen because of history. So I think some of the risks of Bitcoin, one is, and people don't talk about this much, but it's taxation. You know, you can look at it and say they're going to confiscate. They're not going to confiscate it. They're not going to ban it. I mean, China's trying to ban it now because they're coming out with their own cryptocurrencies. So they're trying to drive interest to their own cryptocurrency. Now, frankly, we'll see how long that lasts. I can't imagine it's going to last too long because it's going to drive more people into Bitcoin. But taxation is a real concern, right? And you mentioned lawsuits, certainly. I mean, I don't know what that would look like, but certainly, you know, when you have to deal with the court system, that's different than just saying, hey, you should all voluntarily give up your Bitcoin. But taxation is a real risk, right? And, you know, if they start saying, well, we're not going to say you have to give it up, but we're going to tax you 120%, like they tax cars in, I forget what country is, like Sweden or Norway, they tax cars like 120% tax. So that is a potential threat. If they really wanted to do it, that's how I would do it if I was them. There's certainly the lack of interest is a threat. So if for instance, Bitcoin has competition, which I would argue any technology is going to have competition from a better system. And that is a potential risk down the road, not right now, because I haven't seen any that tweak my interest, but I would imagine there's going to be some at some point that's going to usurp Bitcoin. You know, losing keys is similar to losing gold. So I'm not sure that that's any greater of a risk. Although I would say that the risk of complexity is an issue. I mean, Paul and I and Erica and Rich and we all debated this at a prior time. But you know, the thing is with crypto is you have these early adopters, these people who are really interested in you know, in that freedom, in the math. I mean, no matter what your interest is, there's a reason to be interested in Bitcoin. But the challenge is it's still not easy for Joe and Susie Lunchbox to participate. And that's a real problem. It's getting better, right? I mean, you could go down the store and pick up a piece of gold. There's not a lot of complexity there, but with Bitcoin, there's still that complexity. And at some point it will get easy, but right now that is a friction point to it being more widely adopted. So I assume technology will take care of that, but that would, you know, so anyway, so that's kind of my thoughts on it.
I guess I'll go ahead and jump in since you mentioned taxation. So I'm the resident CPA, and that is a risk. That's one of the main reasons people first come to me is I've got these capital gains now, and what do I do, right? So there are strategies to develop to address that, right? That usually work. That usually means setting up some type of entity, right? But as far as the risks, I think the biggest risk for gold is really stagnation. We're all investors, right? So we're all here to put our money someplace that's going to provide us a return, okay? And if we look over, so gold has provided us a nice consistent return over the last year and the last several, 5-6 years. I remember when I was a young boy, probably a teenager, my uncle was bringing over little gold bars and they were $300 an ounce. So we've gone a long way since then. But if we compare that to digital assets, the returns are not comparable, right? And so I think if we look at gold, the risk of just stagnation, it's still going to grow, it's going to go up, but it might not keep pace with inflationary pressures that we do see rising. Generally, gold does good in an inflationary environment. So I see some eyes there, right? So generally, gold does good.
Like a chance to rebut this,
David. I thought you were a gold guy.
For sure. Yeah, but it might not keep pace with digital assets, right? And specifically Bitcoin.
And gold keeps its purchasing power. It has gained very well over the past thousands of years. But from an investor's perspective, you want something that's gaining in purchasing power, which, especially for young people, is very important right now.
But that's speculation compared to wealth
Yes.
preservation. Those are two very different goals. And I think it's important for people to recognize there's nothing wrong with Bitcoin versus gold. They accomplish two very specific things. If you want a speculation,
Not the same.
Bitcoin is great. If you want wealth preservation, then gold is a better choice. But people should just understand they're not the same thing, and they shouldn't try to do the same thing because you're going to get disappointed otherwise.
Yeah, let me just jump in for a second there, because I agree with a lot that's been said. From an asset protection standpoint, I'm not an investment advisor. I'm not telling people how to invest their wealth, but from an asset protection standpoint, we're normally talking about ways to protect and preserve wealth. And I think we can all agree gold does that. It does it very well. The classic analysis is that an ounce of gold 100 years ago bought a finely tailored man's suit. And 100 years later, an ounce of gold buys a finely tailored man's suit. So gold is actually something that protects, it is an asset protection asset. It preserves the wealth you have. It's guaranteed to really not go down in value over time. I think with Bitcoin, obviously there is a lot more, we see it, right? It goes up, it goes down. So it doesn't have that kind of rock solid holding power when it comes to preserving your wealth. At the same time, going back to Erica's comment, which I also agree with, that Bitcoin itself is more or less a finite commodity. It's a lot closer in gold, the way it's produced, even the terminology miners, right? I mean, you have to mine Bitcoin the way you have to mine gold. So it costs energy, it costs time and money to produce a Bitcoin, just like to produce gold. So I think when people are looking at productive assets to protect, preserve their wealth, gold and Bitcoin both fit in there. At this moment in time, the clients that I see, they really don't want cash. I think cash is the big loser in all of this. They send out 1.8 billion or trillion, excuse me, in new stimulus money, and most of that money runs off somewhere. If you look at stocks, what happens? They go up. If you look at Bitcoin, what happens? It goes up. If you look at, gold, what happens? It goes up, because nobody really wants to hold on to the dollars. That's, I think, Kurt, your point about Grisham's law. At the end of the day, people would almost rather have any of those productive things than dollars. So I think from an asset protection standpoint, they both serve a role. Obviously, way more volatility with the cryptocurrencies, and Bitcoin, probably more upside. I think, Erica, we were at a conference together, and I like the way you summed it up. You said gold is to preserve wealth, and Bitcoin presumably is to grow your wealth.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that, I'll add one more risk to Bitcoin.
Of course you will, Rich.
Because it came out in the conversation. I think, Erica, you said it perfectly. Joel, Kirk, yes, gold's role is not to make money. It never has been. Its role is to preserve purchasing power, to be a store of wealth, to be your wealth insurance. It has done that for 5,000 years. And David, I will tell you, I think it's going to happen for another 5,000 years. There's no question. The track record is established. The problem I see with Bitcoin is this, and you can see it in the volatility. Erica, you probably know the answer to this.
Tell me.
How many percentage-wise account holders of Bitcoin control 95% of Bitcoin's wealth?
Right now, it's definitely, I'm going to say around like 200 wallets or less.
2.4% of all Bitcoin account holders control 95% of Bitcoin's wealth. Is there any question why it is as volatile as it is? Make no mistake, people are not buying this as a hedge. They're not buying it for diversification. They're not buying it because it's a revolution. They're buying it because they see the price going up and they want to participate. I think most of the easy money is in the hands of the 2.4% that control the majority of that market. And that's a problem for a stable investment going forward.
I agree with you that gold is the hands down historical best store of value, and I agree that it will continue to be a significant store of value for the future. Now, I'll share something with you that is really the biggest, the most cogent kind of argument for Bitcoin I've ever heard. And it's from Michael Saylor, that what if I want to leave $10 million to a 5-year-old, right? If I want to do that in gold, I've got a problem because I've got storage costs. I've got storage costs that are going to eat my principal up over time, right?
Depends where you
Like-
store it. I can
Well,
solve that
yes.
problem for you, by the way.
Is the cost zero? Is the cost to store it for 20 years zero?
Zero. I can solve that
you taught
problem.
me
Everybody
something-
call me if you need that solution.
You've taught me something just now. So that's the biggest kind of argument that I've heard for Bitcoin, that you can take $10 million worth of Bitcoin, put it on a hardware wallet, pull it offline, set it to the side, put the keys someplace, and it is in fact safe. You still are subject to the volatility though, right? So you still haven't solved that problem. But from a carrying cost perspective, Bitcoin is superior to gold. But like I said, you just taught me something. So
Yeah, and from a volatility perspective too, it's like right now, volatility is a feature. It's not a bug. If you look at the market cap of Bitcoin, it's around $700 billion. Like we hit $1 trillion and then we went back down, but we actually hit $1 trillion on my birthday. But gold's market cap is around 10 trillion. So it's still a fraction of the cost. When you look at things in math terms and you see this denominator of only $700 billion, it is going to be volatile, especially if we want it to eventually become a solid store of value one day. It's just too early right now. It is very speculative, but the properties behind it make it super effective. And to David's point too, where it's like, if you want to give $10 million to a 5-year-old, first of all, this 5-year-old probably understands technology, so you're not going to have those barriers of learning. That learning curve very, very diminished, and also like, you know, this 5-year-old is not going to, I mean, it always just brings me back to, because like everybody here on this call, this is the reason why this conference is happening, is because we understand that there is something serious going on with the economy right now. So gold, I say Bitcoin, bullion, bullets, beer, booze, like
Land.
whatever, right? Land, there you go.
Fingernail polish.
Fingernail polish, real estate. Whatever. So
Just
we have
be
to-
careful when you buy it though, because I mean, if you gifted that $10 million and you died on the wrong day, I mean, the next day it could be worth $4.7 million, right? It's an incredibly volatile market. If you want to store, cryogenically freeze that purchasing power, that's gold. That's what you do. I love Bitcoin. You know this. I have said this on multiple panels. I mean, I bought it at $230 a Bitcoin.
Rich
I
is an
love
OG, guys.
I love it. Okay. But you know, I understand what it is in this stage in its existence. It's a speculation. You can say it can be all these other things. We'll find out if it is. I think you can make a lot of money there. I think it's money that you ought to put up that you could lose too, because I do think the early adopters are the ones that made out like bandits.
I do want to
Okay.
make one point that was brought up, and it sounds like we're going to a different topic, but the having Bitcoin in a small number of hands, I think, is an important topic, because it's something I've been thinking about. Like when I think about the markets in general, like they're mainly institutionally driven. If you think about stocks, bonds, I mean, institutions are ones that are moving the market, not the individuals. I know, you know, AMC and GameStop have been moved by individuals, but generally speaking, that's kind of a rarity for that to happen. And you know what I think is interesting is it's Bitcoin has started in kind of like in the hobbyist circles and the techies and the cryptographers started, and it's getting into the institutional space now. And I would have been shocked if Bitcoin just went straight up this year, because you have the JP Morgans of the world that are talking about buying it for their private clients, and Goldman Sachs, and they're not going to buy it when it's 100,000. So I'm not shocked that the market sold off. I would be shocked if they're not in there buying hand over fist, because those are the strong hands. Those are the people that aren't going to sell, and they're the ones that are going to keep the price at a certain level of stability, because they're just not going to sell. And so what I think, I mean, I made this claim last time over email and everybody laughed at me, but I think gold is probably going to outperform Bitcoin this year. But I do think Bitcoin is going to continue to take off once those institutional buyers have come in and bought their share, because the only reason it gets up to, 100,000, 200, 300,000 is from the institutions, because they're the ones that are driving it. I mean, Erica knows this because she's in those circles, but that's really what's going to drive it to the next level. And they're in there buying, and they're talking about it nonstop. You don't see too many bears out there now talking about Bitcoin. You see a lot of really, really smart hedge fund managers, macroeconomic hedge fund managers that have been very successful in their career, and they're in there buying, and they're going to hold. So I think it's important just to note, just for people who are freaking out at the price drop, but I do think that there's a floor, and the institutions will be in there, keeping that price stable.
Yeah, but just real quick on the point of gold outperforming Bitcoin, if gold were to double, you would have to add $10 trillion to its market cap, right? If Bitcoin were to double, you would have to add 700 billion. And some of these other small altcoins,
No,
it's like,
not true.
tell me.
I'm not talking about
We're
it
measuring
doubling.
it in dollars, right? All that needs to happen is the dollar needs to fall.
Interesting.
We're talking about keeping things in perspective, though, Erica, because you're talking about Bitcoin doubling. I'm not claiming it's going to double this year. I think it might, but I think what I'm talking about is there's, the markets go through cycles, right? Gold was kind of the, it was the kind of the loser at the party for the last 6 months, only because it went up a lot. And Bitcoin was, the belle of the ball. And now it's not. And that goes through cycles. I mean, you could look at Bitcoin's cycle. It goes in favor and that goes out of favor. And it fluctuates based on the interest. And this is no different from gold. Gold was in a bull market for 10 years, and then it hit a bear market for a while, and now it's coming back. So that is a normal thing for any
healthy.
sort of asset. Yeah, it's healthy. Exactly. It's what economies should go through, buyers and sellers, and it's normal. It's not happening in our economy these days because the Fed prints so much money. But the fact is that is a normal cycle. And I expect that, Bitcoin is going to have another day in the sun. I just think, if for at least the next 3 months, at least till Freedom Fest, I think gold's going to outperform. I think in the fall, probably Bitcoin will come back because you will have enough institutional buyers in there to buy it to drive the price back up again. But that's kind of a short-term prediction.
Let me just jump in, because one of my very good friends in the gold industry said something almost exactly the way you said it. And he was talking about how gold's really moving. I said, but hold on, I understand this issue about Bitcoin and the volatility. But 6 months ago, I hosted a conference. Many of you were there in Las Vegas. And, we were talking about the fact that gold or Bitcoin was going from 18 to $19,000. So yes, it tripled in value, more than tripled in value, up into the 60,000 range. But 6 months later, Bitcoin is still more than 100% above where it was 6 months ago, even at its lowest. So when you talk about Bitcoin doubling, well, guess what? In the last 6 months, it already did. Meanwhile, gold, what did gold do? It fluttered up a little bit, fluttered down a little bit. I looked 6 months ago, it was almost within $1, the same price. So I think it goes back to what we were talking about before. Yes, you have to have a hearty stomach for the volatility. But if we're really going to talk about, which one's done better over the last 6 months, I don't even think you can compare the two. I mean, you have to just pick the last couple of weeks and say, oh, well, if you bought Bitcoin at 65,000, then you're really screwed because, now it's only worth 40, you lost, a big chunk of your money. But except for those people, most everybody is really up when it comes to their Bitcoin investments.
See, but I think this is where the argument gets confusing for people. Kirk said it earlier. You got to understand why you're buying the asset. Okay. You're not buying gold. And I know he just made a prediction and you're refuting that, but you're not buying gold to make a killing, to make money. If you are, I think you're making a mistake. It's not what it's there for.
I
It's
agree
wealth
with you,
protection
Rich.
and stability.
I think gold will go up, not because of its increased value. It'll go up because, like you say, the value of the dollar. If the value of the dollar goes down by 50%, then gold will be worth twice as much.
Every dollar is going to be worth less, and it's going to take more of them to buy an ounce of gold. So that's gold's story. But for the audience, understand that's why you buy gold. You're not buying it for a speculation. And I think, and I think Bitcoiners take offense with this, and they're like, it's not a speculation, it's a real asset and all this other stuff. But it is a speculation. I mean, when people buy it because they want the price to go high, because greed is driving their train, then it is bought for a speculation. And it's going to behave like a speculation. You can't call a duck a pig. It is what it is. They're buying it because they want the price to go up, and the market will act that way. That's why you have 15 drops in the Bitcoin price from 30 to 87% in a 12-year existence. It's a speculative asset. Period.
it's also
Can I jump in here for a minute? Okay, let me just do a couple things here. We're talking about Bitcoin as if it's a standard financial asset that was put out by some quant in Lower Manhattan. It's not. Bitcoin. This sounds trite, but it isn't. Bitcoin's a revolution. Bitcoin is a new thing. It's never been done before. You know, people buy gold because they want to, have money that have value. There you go. I love it. They want to have
Here's silver too, though.
All right. That's going to last for a long
Get
time.
it? Bitcoin wants to be gold. I get it. Go ahead.
And that's fine. So having money that lasts a long time is fine. But there are also a lot of people who buy gold who want to have honest money and to have money win. That's a different thing than just having money for long term. They're both fine. But there are a lot of gold and silver advocates who want to have win. So we have a world that's based upon understandable concepts and flows, a world that's comprehensible. Bitcoin does exactly that. And it does it really, really well. All of the things that, people get into it for number going up. Well, that's true. A lot of people do get in for number going up. But once they're into it for a year or two, if they don't get, completely beat up by getting kicked in the gut every once in a while, which, as I always say, that's the price of entry to Bitcoin, you're going to get massive gains, but you're going to get kicked in the gut sometimes.
Come for the Lambo, stay for the revolution, right, Paul?
Come for the Lambo, stay for the revolution. I wish I would have made those T-shirts, but that's what happens to them. And even when the almighty states try to hurt Bitcoin, Bitcoin was made for that. Bitcoin was built to be an outsider currency. Wall Street is discovering it now because it also happens to be the greatest store of value ever created. It's backed by mathematics. If you can break 2.2 times 2 equals 4, then you can break Bitcoin. And if you can't break 2 plus 2 equals 4, you can't break Bitcoin. So it is the greatest store of value. It is perfect collateral. It is the finest form of collateral I can think of in human history. And that hasn't mattered right now because they can print up trillions of dollars with a keystroke, but it's going to matter one of these days. So Bitcoin has immense value that you lose when you just think of it in terms of, our typical investment vocabulary.
I know David wants to say something. I'll just say this. I hear all those wonderful narratives, and I believe in unicorns and rainbows too. But the bottom line is when people talk about Bitcoin, the first words of their mouth are not, I'm in it for the revolution. The first words out of their mouth are not, I'm trying to diversify my portfolio. The first words out of their mouth aren't this, that, or the other. The first thing that comes out of every one of their mouths is, my Bitcoin is up whatever percent.
That's not true, Rick. Honest to God, that's not true.
I haven't heard a different answer yet. It started on this panel today. I'm telling you, when I hear those words come out of people's mouths first, I'll believe your fairy tale narrative.
Well, I can tell you that since the beginning, those of us who've been involved, and I wasn't involved at the very beginning. I was involved.
I know where you're coming from. I'm
precursor
talking about
currencies.
the rest of the folks.
We didn't give a damn about number go up.
Yeah.
We wanted honest, good money that was decentralized and wasn't controlled by people who are half crazy. That's what we wanted. And thank God, somehow, miraculously, we got it.
Sounds like
Here
Paul
it
came
is.
for the revolution and stayed for the Lambo.
Well, that's it.
And I'm going to go back
That
to
part
something
is true.
Joel said, because Joel said people don't want cash. And I think that's something we all can agree on, is
There's no
that we
question.
realize that cash is the real problem, right? And gold is a positive, Bitcoin is a positive. They do serve different roles. And kind of thinking from a bigger picture, I use this analogy often. And I would disagree with you, Rich, that a lot of the people I talk to, they are in it for the revolution. Maybe because they've been in it long enough to where they're already like, okay, I'm wealthy now and I'm trying to, I want to interact with the community. So there's a lot of revolutionaries out there. But did I just lose it? He was talking about, yeah, go for it, Kirk. It'll come back to me.
No, I was just saying we can hear you. I didn't know.
Yeah. And I would say that like, 2.4% of wallets that control Bitcoin, a lot of those people have lost their wallets, so they can't touch them anyways. But also those early adopters who've had Bitcoin for a long time, those are the anarcho-capitalists, those are libertarians who did start the revolution, and now they're sticking around for the Lambos.
Okay.
I think next topic, guys. What else is on the list?
We've hit an impasse.
Well, we covered a lot.
It came back to me, Daniel, if you would give me just a second.
Yeah,
so
David, go ahead.
I was talking about people don't want dollars. And when we think about what's coming, I think CBDCs are coming. The Federal Reserve is on a listening tour right now. They're going to try
to us right now,
and we'll see what happens, right?
They're smart.
But yeah, they're smart. And so that tells me that blockchain is really where it's at. So Bitcoin runs on blockchain technology. We're on maybe, blockchain 5 or 6.0. There's a number of different varieties of blockchains, but that's the revolution. Bitcoin runs on blockchain. Facebook runs on the internet. Which is more important, Facebook or the internet?
I agree with David.
I think the egg.
And so I really think that it's blockchain, because I see clients from all over the world who are in more than just Bitcoin, right? So we've been talking about Bitcoin, but there's a whole world of digital assets out there, and there are operating companies in the blockchain space, right? So there's a kind of a key distinction. Bitcoin is a commodity. It serves a purpose. It's a store of value, all those good things. But we should also be aware that there's a whole ecosystem growing around blockchain, and that ecosystem is going to support Bitcoin as well.
Yeah,
I agree with David. I think it's an important point to look back at history and to look at, how the internet started, right? When the internet started, much the same way that blockchain started, you have these early adopters, you have these hobbyists, and then when it gets mainstream, you think of like the .com boom, right? It was all about these .com companies. Well, how many of those are still around? Right? Only a handful. Most of the normal companies, the retailers, they just put .com in their name, and then they just merged .com with their other company. It didn't continue along that same path. And I think it's a great point, because I think blockchain is going to take the same path, where whatever the start is, I don't know what the future of Bitcoin is going to be. No one does, right? And no one knows if Ethereum may be around or all these others. But I know it's going to change, and there'll be improvements, and there'll be people come in and make it better and come up with better improvements on that for future iterations. But I think it's important to recognize what David said, is that it's really about the blockchain more than Bitcoin. And what the blockchain brings us, and I know Paul supports this point of view, is, it's revolutionary, and it is the next evolution of, it's the next quote unquote internet that's going to revolutionize a lot of parts of our economy and our culture.
Yeah, I've got strong opinions about gold, so I kind of become the poster child for the anti-Bitcoin movement. But what you guys got to understand is I just love Bitcoin. I agree with Kirk. I agree with David. The blockchain technology is something that got me excited from day one. In a world where everybody and everything is trying to figure out how to do business peer-to-peer, that's your answer. Okay, so I love blockchain, and everybody that finds a way to adopt it is going to be successful going forward. I also love the very first debate we did with Escape Artists back in, May or April or March or something of last year. Erica, and there was one other panelist for the Bitcoin side, not the guy running naked in New York, the other guy. He basically said that a lot of people came in, kind of what Erica just said, where they came in and they were driven to buy Bitcoin because of the price potential. And then they learned about Austrian School of Economics, they learned about Ayn Rand, they learned about, sound fiscal policy, et cetera. And that alone got me excited about cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin in particular, because if anybody learns anything about how to be fiscally responsible out of this mess that we call an economy right now, and a mismanaged currency that is just beyond belief, it is worth having around. Make no mistake.
And I'll say that I almost every day I see new people coming to me because maybe it's, approachable, an accountant, they're comfortable with that. They come to me and they say, I want to learn about it. And those are the people who are really, really going to be long-term important to the system, because they're curious. They're not just about, okay, money is going up. Yeah, these are professionals, right? These aren't people who are like needing money right now, right? They're cautious with what they've got. They're looking to the future. They're making simple decisions, right? But they see that, let me learn about it. And I think that sentiment will continue to grow as everyday Joe Blow gets involved. And here's something that is interesting as well, is institutional custody. So if you've been in it long enough, you can look back to when we had like Bitcoin IRA, right? And they had people running around with ledgers trying to like make your transaction happen on your Bitcoin IRA, right? But we're past that now. Now we have the Curve DAO token. We have serious, robust institutional custody solutions. And that, in my personal opinion, that was the game changer, right? And is the game changer. So you look at a firm like iTrust Capital, Kingdom Trust, who are doing Bitcoin IRAs, and they have that robust custody solution. That's what's going to allow these huge institutions, which are in fact going to be the reason the price goes up to the astronomical levels. That's what's going to allow them from a functionality standpoint to really get in. And I think I see that coming this fall. I think right now they're training advisors. I think I've heard JP Morgan's got several thousand advisors they're training up. They've got to teach the guys how to sell it. And then they've got to get the people out into the field and create a marketing campaign. But I bet you once that marketing campaign comes out, it's going to be huge. Because here's what they're going to do. If you're into DeFi, you know that they're doing 20, 30, 35% interest rates paid out daily in DeFi.
Yeah.
All you got to do is offer 5 to 7%, 10% to an individual investor in a regular bank account. All of them are coming. And we can look at the Nexo platform. Every time I show somebody in the Nexo platform, their eyes bug out. 12%? What? Interest paid daily? What? To a DeFi investor, that's a normal thing. But if you're a regular Joe Blow, they're going to jump on that, and the institutions are going to support it and bring all that money in.
I think you make I want to kind of dovetail off what you said, David, because I think really the next evolution of cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin is companies, right? Or any sort of entity that's going to generate cash flow. I mean, Warren Buffett's famous for ripping on gold because you can just stick it there and it doesn't earn you any money. He likes companies with cash flow, right? And I think the same thing with crypto. I mean, people are speculating on Bitcoin because that's all they can do. And, as these companies, these custodians, I love the fact that custodians are coming out now and supporting this. It is such a wonderful thing. I mean, we're exploring a bunch now, but it even goes beyond that. Like somebody asked the question in the comments here about, what do you think about investing in Coinbase? I mean, I don't think we're going to give you recommendations on specific stocks, but I think that's an example of a company that you can invest in that is based around cryptocurrency. And the more companies that have that added to their corporate structure, I think the more interest and the more money that's going to flow into it. So all of these things, to add to what David said, all these things just build on each other to this evolution to the next generation, which is going to be enormous. I mean, I just think about how crypto is going to change the financial industry. I mean, think about it. You got like T+3, you got 3 days to settle a stock trade. Why does it have to be 3 days? Yeah. Why do you have to wait a handful of days to send money across the globe? It is ridiculous. And it's only because the system hasn't changed, because no one bothered to stand up and say, hey, this is stupid. And now the banks make a lot of money off certain reasons, certain reasons for that. And they make a lot of money off the float. But point being is all this going to change, and it's going to be, I mean, I'm so excited for what it's going to be. We just don't know exactly what it looks like yet.
Yeah, absolutely. No, blockchain's cool. DeFi's cool. DeFi's really interesting because, on the back end, the banks, because it is T+3, it is that they have these fractional reserve lending policies. The banks are making these insane gains on the back end, right? And now that power is being brought to the people to where we're going to be the ones that are able to make 80% APY paid out weekly as long as you do certain things. You know, DeFi is this progression of Bitcoin where it's like, let's disintermediate the banks even further. There are so many interesting projects, like you said, David, where it's like, you know, Facebook runs on the internet. I mean, there are, and XYZ runs, like Bitcoin runs on the blockchain, DeFi runs on the blockchain. The blockchain is becoming a whole new layer of itself that is just creating this new world where we are going to be able to get rid of these rent seekers, these middlemen that are there. And, you know, they had a purpose, but now technology has taken us to a point where we can cut them out. And the people who are doing the transactions are the ones that can directly benefit from this. And there's something that Rich said too a while ago that really like kind of hit home with me, was that you guys as gold people have had to convince people that gold is an important store of value, right? And Kirk said this too, you know, Warren Buffett, he's been making fun of gold. But for anybody that is like very freedom minded, likes to be sovereign, understands what's going on in the economy, you're going to want to diversify into some of these assets. So while we are like, you know, maybe the this generation, including Paul over here and now Joel too, and now everyone, actually you guys all love Bitcoin. But like the fact that we are having to convince people that Bitcoin is important, I see it as the same kind of issues that you guys have had too, where it's like you've had to convince people that gold is important, and some people they're just never going to get it, and that's
Erica,
on them.
Still to this day, okay, we are missionaries in America. If I go to Europe, I go to Asia, and I say, you know, you ought to have 5-10% of your net worth in gold as wealth protection. You know what they say? Why so little? If I say that in America, they're like, why so much? I can't afford that. They're not liquid. It's all tied up in something else. You know, we've been fighting that fight for a long time. It's something I absolutely believe in. It's something, you know, when we started our company, Joel knows this story about the tale of the tales. You know, my uncle Michael, his partner Glenn Kirsch, they were there when the Vietnamese refugees came over into the camps to be assimilated into our culture. And a lot of them came over with suitcases full of Vietnamese piastres. When Saigon fell, that paper was worthless. Okay, they'd worked their whole lives for it. Those that were able to convert it into gold or precious gemstones or silver were able to transfer their wealth across borders. It's a very similar vein here with Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies. I just say, welcome to the fight. We can use every able body or able-bodied female or male we can get. It's a tough fight here.
And let me just chime in and say that one thing that I've seen as an asset protection lawyer, you know, I get clients on all sides of this discussion. But one thing that I found very, very interesting is that a lot of the folks who, you know, going back, your uncle's generation, Rich, who are, you know, they're sitting on gold, they bought it at $300. They're calling me up saying, geez, you know, I think I'd like to get a little exposure to Bitcoin. And conversely, you know, some of these Bitcoin whales that are sitting on, you know, $500 million, $1 billion that, you know, it just materialized overnight. They're calling me up with the opposite thing. They're saying, hey, maybe I should take, you know, some of this money and buy some gold. Seems like there's almost a natural affinity for one and the other. So maybe rather than it being versus, maybe it's gold and Bitcoin or Bitcoin and gold, just depends on.
Well, I think it's, Joel, I think it's Bitcoin and gold. There's no question about it. I've said that from the start. My problem is the terminology or the semantics. Just don't call it a store of value if it's not. If you're there to make wealth, generate the wealth. I love it. Okay. But take some of that profit and bank it in something that's proven for 5,000 years to store that purchasing power. I think gold has its role in the portfolio. I think Bitcoin has its role. But I don't confuse the two. I buy them both for different reasons, but I have them both.
I think that's a really just kind of cogent point there. There's different reasons to hold each, right? And if you look at the bigger picture, you kind of almost have to have a little bit of everything, because nobody knows, like what you were saying, Kurt, nobody knows what's going to happen. The future is coming, but we don't know which direction it's going to go. And again, I think that there's a whole ecosystem, and that's where I kind of bank at, right? So Bitcoin is very likely going to continue to grow, but the analogy I use is a digital city. So if you're thinking about if you're building a city, the first thing you would need to build are the sewers and the roads and the electrical stuff. It's really boring. It's not attractive. It's not flashy, but you'll really appreciate it when the sewer works, when the city is going, right? And that's the point we're at right now with blockchain, with the whole kind of ecosystem manifesting. And we can look at that because we look at companies like Cardano, Chainlink, companies that are connecting blockchains, that are building development platforms. And those companies, to Kirk's point, those are real companies. And that's actually how I wound up getting involved in Bitcoin. So I'm a CPA. I went to University of Oregon. While I was there, I had a opportunity to go down to Palo Alto to visit an accounting firm down there. And while I was there, I got a chance to go to Ripple's offices, right? And at that time, I didn't know anything about, I'd heard of Bitcoin. This is like 2014, 15. I'd heard of Bitcoin. It was a thing. I was like, yeah, I was an accounting student, right? So it's funny money back then, right? The accounting major, I was like, Bitcoin is funny money. But when I went and saw Ripple's offices, and then several months later, I saw the coin, I said, okay, that's a real company. And I think that as that occurs, as more and more professionals, more and more sophisticated investors, real companies, I think that that's going to be a huge, huge boon to the overall industry.
Fidelity invested $200 million into a huge custody solution. They've been mining Bitcoin since 2015. BNY Mellon, the oldest bank in the United States, is now accepting Bitcoin for custody. All these different players are coming in. And from my little anarcho-capitalist perspective, I don't necessarily like those things, but as an asset class, and for it to become more secure, more trusted, without even having to go through all the history of it, just saying, oh, these big names, a lot of people like that. They invest because they see that Andreessen Horowitz has gotten in, or whoever else has supposed to have done their due diligence. But yeah, I mean, Bitcoin's we're still a baby. It's like 1993, probably, of the tech boom.
You're not a baby, you're an adolescent.
Yeah,
full
12.
of angst, still trying to figure out who you are, but you're a little older than a baby. Yeah.
Definitely.
And I would probably disagree, Erica, that the banks are going away. I think they're just too big. I don't think they're going anywhere, right? So as much as I would hope that they would get too big to fail and we could disintermediate, there will be some of that, but I think he who has the gold makes the rules, and I think that at the moment they kind of got the gold. We'll see if we make.
I don't
Well,
ever think
the banks
I
aren't
don't-
going away quietly. To
Exactly.
your point,
they're going to try to do something with Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, they've got banks have been around for a long time, and for good reason, right? I mean, the Federal Reserve is there for a reason, and the banks, they'll find another way to make money. I mean, you look at all these banks that are no longer allowed to have trading desks like they used to, and used to mint money because they would just front run trades and all these things they used to do legally. Things have changed, and they adapt. And so I'm under no illusion that they're going to be disappearing, as much as I think we would all like to see that. It'd be nice to say we could do all these transactions without banks, but then the government is going to come in and support them too and say, well, you need to have oversight, and can't do this without oversight, because then people will be laundering money. Whether that's true or not is irrelevant. But the fact is they're going to come in with their arguments and say, hey, we need to do this. And the banks have a good lobbyist. So I think we all kind of are on the same page that things are going to happen the way they happen, whether you want them to or not. But I think it's nice that at the moment we're able to circumvent the banks, and we'll see if they're still in the game later on, or maybe they're in a different game.
Yeah, I definitely don't think that banks are going away. I don't think the dollar is going away. I think what happens is Bitcoin, it allows for this parallel system for people to be able to continue to transact. I mean, what's happening with the banks is they're creating the CBDC. They're taking this technology of blockchain. They're saying, wow, this is so innovative. How can we use this for ourselves? And they're creating their own form of, using the technology of Bitcoin, but it's just like the dollar, right? CBDC, there's no limited supply. They can print it arbitrarily. The transparency on the back end is probably going to be very, very limited. So, it is this upgrade. But Bitcoin is if I say dollars, you think United States. If I say pesos, you think Mexico. If I say yuan, you think China. If I say Bitcoin, you think internet, right? This is the money of the internet, and you can't stop it. I know they want to try, but you can't stop it.
So I have a question. What do we think about the public sentiment when or if CBDCs come? Is that going to be positive or negative for digital assets, Bitcoin?
I think it's going to be positive. in general, because for at least for a little bit. And then I think what's going to happen is that because it's a little difficult because there's so many different factors in play. CBDCs, they're going to use people's misunderstanding of technology, and they're going to say, oh, great, look at the CBDCs. It's just like Bitcoin. People like Paul, myself, we've been
It's
saying
the anti-Bitcoin.
it pretty much is, but they're going to use the technology. But they're going to force people to use the CBDC. Do you want your stimulus check? Here, use the CBDC.
Exactly.
This is how we're going to distribute it.
And-
So people are going to be forced to use it, but I hope that there is some Devi way that we can take our CBDC and put it into Bitcoin. Let's see if a Uniswap or something pops up for that, which is unicorns, by the way, Rich. I don't know if you've seen Uniswap.
Yeah, I'm scared of CBDCs. I think it's government's way to know every single thing you spent your money on, every penny of it. They'll have absolute control and knowledge. They'll be able to give and take away at will from your accounts because it is their account. We're just living on it. And that's what I think they'd like in the end. I think negative interest rates, all this stuff comes on the table because they'll have the ability to affect everybody's account at will. I think it's a government bureaucrat's dream, but I think it's our nightmare.
Well, I think, Rich, I think you're right about those. I don't think they'll get it. I
hope you're right.
I don't really think they're going to be building it on a blockchain either. I think it'll probably be more like Visa and MasterCard that gets nationalized and they sell it with some fear storm. And I don't think in the United States, at least, I don't think they're going to get it. God help us. I certainly hope they don't, because what you're describing, and I don't think unfairly, is monstrous. It's just flat out nasty evil. I think as a practical matter, if they're able to get it that far, people will escape into Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, and gold, of course, too. I've told you this before. I want to see people who hold gold and silver. I want them to start using it in daily commerce. I don't want it just on the shelf. Yeah, have it in a shelf, have it in a warehouse, if you got any significant amounts, but I want to see people use it in daily commerce too, because gold and silver are decentralized currency, and there's a lot of value in using them. So anyhow, on the CBDCs, they are just flat evil. I don't think they will get them. I certainly hope not. And, Bitcoin and other things will be the refuge from them. And God, nobody please ever treat these things like they are anything but the worst sort of psychological mimetic weapon that's ever been developed by a twisted human soul.
Let's hope the force prevails. I can hear Bitcoin now saying to CBDCs, CBDC, I'm your father.
No.
Okay, on that note,
Visa and MasterCard
All
might
right.
be saying that, not Bitcoin.
all right. I wish we could have you guys chatting for a couple more hours, but unfortunately we have to go to our next panel. And if anyone missed any of these speakers' individual talks through the week, be sure to purchase a ticket, which comes with the recordings. But once again, thank you, Erica, Kirk, David, Paul, Joel, and Rich. And I'm sure I'll be talking to all of you soon. Thank you for continuing to participate in our events. And I'm sure all the viewers appreciate it and love all your inputs. And David, I think your first time here, so welcome to the club.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. I have enjoyed the conversation.
Welcome to the band.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And, so we will see all of you soon. And on to the next panel. And have a good one, guys.
Thank
Thank
you all.
you. Have a nice day, y'all.
Thank you all.